Let's speak to Mr Bercow now to get his reaction. And Mr Bercow, from the start, you have denied any of the claims made against you. Given the report's findings today that you're a serial liar and a serial bully, are you reflecting differently on the actions that you took while in the House of Commons?
Thank you, Sarah Jane. No, I'm not reflecting differently on them at all. I regard it as a kangaroo court. The process has been protracted, Kafkaesque and completely unjust. As far as I'm concerned, I have told the truth from the start of the investigation to its finish. I'm very sorry that in pursuit of headlines in a very chock-a-block media environment, the independent expert panel has chosen to use language that is unlawyerly, which is intemperate, and which is hyperbolic. I accept that they have a right to make a decision, but I am not obliged to accept that its decision is right. It isn't, and I don't.
Mr Bercow, we do interrupt our continuing coverage of Ukraine because this is important. Standards in public life are being talked about a lot, given what's going on in the current government. Obviously, events in Ukraine are overshadowing that, but we're revisiting it because of the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme's findings. You call it a kangaroo court, but this is a committee that was chaired by a former Lord Justice of Appeal and chairman of the bar. It also gathered evidence that would have been the same evidence gathered in civil law, and this was a scheme set up to clean up standards in public life, to hold public figures like yourself to account. So for you to call it a kangaroo court today undermines all the work that's being done in politics to try and right itself.
No, I don't accept that at all. I think we need to be absolutely clear. The so-called independent expert panel wasn't studying the cases. It was the sanctions body and, if you like, the body to which one could appeal. Huge swathes of evidence were ignored by that panel. Hearsay was preferred over the testimony of people.
It wasn't hearsay, it was following processes and standard proof required by civil law. Everyone involved, everyone involved, including yourself, had access to legal advice. Just looking at some of the findings of the report, some of the complaints were supported by the evidence of notebook entries and to a significant extent by other witnesses. However, John Bercow tried to refute the content of the notes. He was not able to do so. The evidence from them is compelling, and therefore the report was bound to conclude that the respondent has lied extensively to try and avoid the thrust of these allegations.
No, well, you're just reading from the report, which, of course, Sarah Jane, you're absolutely entitled to do. But what I'm saying to you, yes, and if you'd be kind enough to allow me to reply, I will. Thank you. The answer is that I don't accept any of that. I feel like we're getting into passive-aggressive territory here, which I don't want to, so please continue. No, we're not getting into any... No, we're not getting into any passive-aggressive territory as far as I'm concerned. What I would say to you is very simply this. Hearsay, that is to say, the testimony of people who were not present, was preferred over the testimony of people present. An allegation was made, for example, that I threw a phone.
You're calling it hearsay.
And the fact... I'm sorry... You can't be a witness to something which you didn't attend. And when witnesses present said, no, I do not accept that allegation, that did not happen, the investigators chose instead to accept testimony from people who had heard second or third hand.
OK, I'll bring in some testimony from someone who was there, one of those who accused you of bullying. And they said there was talk of, there was shouting, fist shaking and throwing things. It details an incident where a mobile phone was thrown while John Bercow was standing over me and it burst into hundreds of bits. I could feel them hitting me. It was the most violent, extraordinary display of temper. That's not hearsay, that's direct evidence from somebody involved. Do you feel that your language or actions were appropriate in your, as it's described in the report, your extraordinary position of power?
Forgive me, Sarah Jane, you're just repeating an allegation with which I had already dealt, but I'm very happy to address it. Yes, a complainant claims that I threw a phone. When the witness who was allegedly brought in to pick up the pieces was asked about it, that witness did not, repeat, not corroborate the allegation. There was a second allegation that I had thrown a phone, and in that respect, the person with whom I'd been in a meeting was asked for his testimony, and he said categorically, in terms unmistakable, that I had not done so. So I stand by my point that the people who were supposedly witnesses at the event said, no, this did not happen.
There were 21
but the decision makers have chosen to conclude that it did.
21 complaints
No,
upheld.
because Thank you, Sarah Jane, thank you very much indeed for the question. But the answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't believe in faux apologies. This is a flawed process. It's chronically unjust. It appertains to matters up to 12 and a half years ago. From next month, as I'm sure your viewers will want to know, the bullying process, the investigative process, will apply only to matters reported that occurred within 12 months.
Okay.
So 12 months from April,
but
I'm being judged against 12 years. The evidence is poor.
Set up at that time. We keep hearing that Parliament doesn't have an HR department, it doesn't have the due process for complaints to be made. When that scheme was introduced, they then came forward. But let me just put this to you. Is there a chance that perhaps you bullied people without realising? Because a lot of the time, bullies don't realise they're bullying.
That is certainly the case, but the fact is, no, I don't accept that, because there are two criteria, Sarah Jane, in the assessment of bullying: whether somebody felt bullied and whether he or she was reasonably justified in feeling bullied. Now, people can say what they will about how they felt, but in terms of an objective assessment of the evidence, there is no reasonable basis for concluding that I bullied anyone. I repeat that I do not believe there's any serious evidence. And let me put it to you like this. There is no video evidence, there is no audio evidence, there is no email evidence, there is no text evidence, there is hearsay evidence preferred over people.
Do you plan to appeal, and is it right that you've been suspended from the Labour Party today?
I'm not going to get into the matter of the Labour Party. That's a decision for them, which I'm happy to respect and with which I'm not going to argue. On the matter of appeal, that matter has already been dealt with by the process, of which I think you are aware.
OK, John Bercow, thank you for your time.